The latest IPC snapshot projects that over the coming months, 1.95 million people in Gaza, or 91% of the population, would face acute food insecurity or IPC Phase 3 or worse, but also said some 876,000, or 41% of the Palestinian population trapped in the enclave, would experience emergency levels of hunger or IPC 4. While close to 350,000 would face catastrophic levels or IPC Phase 5, also known as famine.
Today's findings by the IPC, which is, as you know, the recognized authority on food security, are beyond terrifying. They show that the number of people at catastrophic levels of hunger is expected to double in the coming months, and the risk of famine persists across the whole of Gaza. The world cannot let this happen. This crisis is principally the consequences of decisions made by the Israeli authorities. It is in their power to change the situation urgently. I have previously warned that starvation of civilians as a method of warfare is prohibited under international humanitarian law. It constitutes a war crime. As the occupying power, Israel has the specific obligations under international humanitarian law to bring into Gaza the necessary foodstuffs, medical supplies, and other articles, and to facilitate humanitarian relief by all means at its disposal.
Israel has been under pressure to allow more aid into Gaza, but has also pushed back by accusing Hamas of stealing and diverting food aid that does enter the enclave, a claim the group has denied. But with lawlessness rife and gang-like looting commonplace, UN officials have used it as examples of why a cessation of hostilities was needed to allow for a return to some type of order, let alone for the relief of a traumatized population.
Türk also pointed to the fact that only a trickle of aid had entered North Gaza in just the last 2 weeks.
There are reports that Israeli forces are preventing humanitarian aid from accessing the north, exacerbating the already desperate humanitarian and medical needs. Israel's evacuation orders appear designed to cut off North Gaza completely from the rest of the territory as bombing and other attacks continue. There are serious concerns about a large-scale forcible transfer of civilians not meeting the requirements of international law for evacuation on imperative military grounds. Forcible transfer of a large part of the population of North Gaza would amount to a war crime. I call on Israel immediately to facilitate the massive influx of humanitarian aid that is needed across all parts of Gaza.
You've consistently called on member states in the UN Security Council.
We pressed the High Commissioner on his calls for the Security Council members to prevent a wider conflict in the Middle East, a competency that appears to have escaped the Council's current capacity or willingness from powerful key states, in addition to legally binding orders of the International Court of Justice that have largely been ignored.
It is important to hold to account each and every body that has responsibility in the international system, and the Security Council is part of it. In fact, the Security Council has pronounced itself and asked for a ceasefire. Let's not forget this. The issue now is to make sure that it actually gets implemented. The same is when it comes to the provisional measures of the International Court of Justice. There were 3 provisional measures that have been issued. They are binding. They need to be implemented, and each and every member state, not just of the United Nations, but of everywhere, has an interest that international law is respected. My role is to constantly point this out so that it doesn't get forgotten, because we actually have an international legal system that is there to be used, and it's to be used robustly, and it's to be used by each and every member state that cares about the rule of law.
On other files, the High Commissioner also pointed to evidence of war and atrocity crimes in the ongoing conflict in Sudan, where 25 million people face acute hunger. Gang violence in Haiti that has killed close to 4,000 people. Continued devastation, human rights violations and war crimes in Ukraine nearly 1,000 days after Russia's invasion. While in Myanmar, Military artillery strikes on civilians, mass arrests and extrajudicial killings continue in breach of international human rights and humanitarian law. Sherman Bryceby's SABC News, New York.